All right, it's my pleasure to get to introduce our speakers today. The goal of our webinar is to update you on what's been happening with adult protective services and child welfare since the MBR, which happened this winter and spring of 2014. And so we're going to be talking about what's happened since we first were really involved in that work to support additional investments in adult protective services, or you'll hear people call it APS, and child welfare. Both systems have been closely looked at this year by advocates and by the administration, so you probably won't be surprised to hear that things have gotten a little complicated. But on the webinar, we're going to try to give you the key points so that you feel up to speed and you are ready to be a great advocate in the months ahead. Our three speakers today bring a lot of knowledge to the work and the advocacy around adult protective services and child welfare. Our first speaker is Beth Kowalczyk. Beth is the Chief Policy Officer of the Ohio Association of Area Agencies on Aging, or O4A they go by. She's also very active with OCAPS, the Ohio Coalition of Adult Protective Services, and serves as their Public Policy Chair. Gayle Tenenbaum is a longtime friend of Advocates for Ohio's Future. She's also the Director of Policy and Government Affairs at the Public Children's Services Association of Ohio, PCSAO. And then finally, we'll be hearing from Joel Potts, who is the Executive Director of the Ohio Job and Family Services Directors Association. We're going to kick off our presentation today focusing on adult protective services, and Beth is going to be speaking to that. So Beth, are you ready to join us on the call?
Beth, one thing that you may have not done if you have dialed in, if you click on the phone button at the top left, there's an audio pin. So you have to hit star, then the number, and then pound.
Okay, hello. Can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that technical assistance. Yes, I'm Beth Kowalczyk, and I'm with the Ohio Association of Area Agencies on Aging, and I'm also representing OCAPS, the Ohio Coalition for Adult Protective Services today, and thank you very much for having me on this webinar. I just want to say that the Area Agencies on Aging see adult protective services as a high priority for advocacy. The Area Agencies on Aging have a federal mandate to advocate on behalf of older adults, so we feel that this is very important work, and we are very happy to be a part of it and to actually be able to share some exciting opportunities with all of you today. And if I click next, oh, that works. Okay, great. So what I thought I would do is just provide a very high-level overview of adult protective services. The poll that we just took, obviously, there are people who are far more experienced in the system than I am, so this is just a basic high-level overview to then give you context for the recommendations that I'm going to talk about. But the Ohio Adult Protective Services Law was enacted in 1981 as a result of growing awareness of elder abuse being a major social issue. And it's my understanding that Ohio was in the forefront in looking at a state adult protective services system and looking at state laws. The purpose of adult protective services is to assist adults age 60 or older who are in danger of harm, unable to protect themselves, and have no one else to assist them. And just as a high-level overview of what the Adult Protective Services System does is that there are four main components. Prevention, which really deals with education, outreach, identifying at-risk adults, and that moves into identification. There are people or professions who have been identified as mandatory reporters. So if they suspect someone at risk of or a victim of elder abuse, neglect, or exploitation, that they are mandated to report that to the county APS program. And then identification also includes screening by Adult Protective Services when a call comes in that is a report of potential abuse, and so they have to screen and determine what the next steps are. The third component is intervention, and that would be investigating the situation, potentially taking steps to file for protection orders, to secure services, and then also to do case management for someone to minimize future risk and make sure that they remain safe. And then finally, enforcement, which may involve prosecution of abusers or those who are doing the exploitation. So how we got to where I'm going to talk about the actual recommendations we have today, this is kind of the context. Adult Protective Services is currently implemented at the county level, so each county has an Adult Protective Services responsibility. We don't, at this point, have a really comprehensive state system. The state provides technical assistance, data collection, training, but they don't have a comprehensive oversight and regulatory role. Also, this is evidenced by the fact that the state invests very little of state funding in adult protective services. At this point in the state budget, there is $500,000 allocated per year for 88 counties to implement adult protective services, which in a lot of counties is $2,000 or less per year. So counties have had to figure out how to deal with that lack of state resources, and many counties have accessed Title 20 funding or levy funds. Counties have narrowed their focus on what they will invest their resources in as far as reporting or outreach or case management. They may look at just emergency situations. They may leverage other resources. And some counties don't have full-time workers. They will share with other share duties with other programs, in particular child protective services as well. So it's a patchwork of programs. What you may see in one county is very different from another county depending on resources. And so this has been troubling, I think, for counties and advocates for many, many years. Recently, House Bill 49 was a bill that was introduced, and it was sponsored by the Attorney General's Elder Justice Commission or Elder Abuse Commission, and it is currently pending in the General Assembly, but it would expand abuse to include financial exploitation and expand the people or professions that are considered mandatory reporters. And when it was introduced, it had imposed a lot more responsibility at the state level to do things, more comprehensive data collection and oversight. However, as that bill moved through the House, there were concerns over the fact that there were not resources attached to the requirements on the state and the counties. And so what resulted at the point where the bill was up for a vote was a stripped-down version of the bill, and which did not have many of the things that I've talked about. It has some of them. At the point it was voted out of the House, Representative Emstutz suggested that the mid-biennial budget review would be a place where they could find funding to support the things that were in the House Bill 49. So at this point, House Bill 49 is pending in the Senate, and I know that the Attorney General's office and other folks are trying to move that through, including OCAPS. But in the meantime, advocates took Representative Amstutz's suggestion to heart and pursued potential funding in the mid-biennial budget review bill, House Bill 483. And the primary drivers were the Public Children's Services Association of Ohio and Job and Family Services Directors Association worked together to advocate for funding for both child welfare and adult protective services, focusing on protecting our most vulnerable at both ends of the spectrum. So it was a really tight and good combination of advocacy from their part. And then others, including O4A, OCAPS, AARP, joined together in a coalition to really push for funding for APS. And our ask was for $20 million, hopefully to get a full-time worker APS worker in each county. What we ended up with was $10 million and the formation of an Adult Protective Services work group. So we went from $500,000 to we have $10 million now that is available to the counties for the next year. I don't know why the slides are acting on their own. Okay, so House Bill 483 passed. There's $10 million allocated for APS. It is there needs to be recommendations on how to spend the money, and those recommendations are to be made by the work group. And I'm going to do this. The work group had until September 30th of 2014 to make recommendations, and the recommendations would go to the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services to submit to the controlling board. The work group also had responsibility of really looking at the APS system and identifying gaps and best practices, and ideally for purposes of looking at changes in the law if necessary in the next state budget or other legislation. So the work group met shortly after the bill was passed, and the House Bill 483 actually expressly delineated who was going to be part of the work group, and then other entities were appointed by Job and Family Services, including OCAPS and O4A representatives. But you had several administrative representatives in the governor's office, General Assembly members, and the Directors Association, County Commissioners Association, and AARP. So it has a wide range of experience, but a lot of different and valuable experience in informing what the recommendations would be and to make good recommendations. So the work group was led by Greg Moody, who's the director of the Office of Health Transformation, and they had meetings very quickly, recognizing they didn't have a lot of time to get recommendations to Job and Family Services for the spending of the $10 million. And a lot of the work group meetings were really to get everyone to the same level of understanding as to what APS is and what it should be, and how we got to where we are with the laws and the funding. There were presentations by at least two county programs, Summit counties and Licking counties, and they were very different models, but very interesting approaches to adult protective services. And so finally, in discussing things that the work group members wanted to see in adult protective services, they were able to compile a series of recommendations for spending the $10 million. Those recommendations were delivered to the JFS director and were approved by the controlling board at the October 20th meeting. So the APS funding work group accomplished that requirement, but they are still meeting because they do have other things, responsibilities, including looking at budget bill recommendations for improving adult protective services. So the recommendations, they are posted on the Office of Health Transformation website and also the Human Services Innovation website. That's the new JFS office that was also created by House Bill 483. And I'll give you a summary of those recommendations. The first is that there be identified a core minimum standard for adult protective services that all counties really should be meeting, things that they should be doing in order to have a adequate APS system across all 88 counties. The core minimum requirements are primarily what's already in law, but there are some areas that could potentially be clarified or more fully developed, or things that could be added to it. And the JFS work group is supposed to look at those requirements and finalize them by December 31st, 2014. And these requirements form the basis of what the rest of the recommendations are building towards, that every county will have will be meeting those recommendations by July 1st, 2016. So the recommendations pertaining to county funding are all around how the county is going to meet the minimum requirements and potentially exceed them if they have some great ideas. There is a pot of funding that's recommended for county planning grants, and that would be up to $50,000 per county based on milestones that the county hits, starting with a basic framework of what they intend to do to meet the requirements, the core minimum standards, to the development of interdisciplinary teams, and the development of comprehensive plans with MOUs with partners, and they would need to submit application for funds as they've met the milestones. These funds should be made available from January through December 2015, and the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services is charged with coming up with the application forms and the details regarding how to apply. Also, under county funding, there is a larger pot of funds that are available for one-time innovation fund projects. These are, they've been talking about all kinds of different ideas that counties could engage in that would be beyond basic implementing the core minimum standards. The work group is charged to develop the process and the criteria for this grant, and it's supposed to be a competitive process. The funding is also, in this case, available from January through December 2015. And one of the things that was talked about a lot at the work group is the idea of shared services, that the administration would like to see counties come up with ideas where there are shared services across counties or across different partners. And there was the Summit County Job and Family Services APS presentation talked about their partnership with the county health department. And there are other potential partners that could be involved, including the area agencies on aging. So this is an opportunity for counties that have ideas on things they want to do to put them down on paper and potentially get funding for them. There were also discussions about ideas that were a little smaller scale but would be innovative, such as taking iPads out to do investigations and things like that. And then finally, the other portion of county funding would be one-time system training for all APS staff to bring them all up to a particular level. The state is currently working on core competencies for APS, and so this would be taking that work and compressing it into a basic training for 4 days. And the funding that's available would be stipends for the staff to attend the training. It's $1,000 per staff person. There are also recommendations for the state infrastructure for the $10 million. There's funding that would be allocated for data collection and a reporting system, and that would be in place by December 31st, 2015. And this, I know the state has a system, but it's not very robust. It doesn't do a whole lot. You submit some data, but you can't get a lot of information back. And so this is talking about either enhancing or looking at other systems that could be more comprehensive. They're not necessarily talking about a case management system, but more around the data collection and reporting. Also, there is a small amount of funding dedicated towards, or recommended for, an APS hotline statewide. And this would be a number that would route people to their county APS system. And the work group recognized that some counties may not be prepared to accept calls until they have their full plan in place for how they're going to meet the core minimum standards. So part of the requirements will be how will you respond when you get hotline calls, and making sure that you have coverage in order to take those calls and act on them. And then finally, there's also funding in this training component for the state to extend their vendor contract on implementing the core competencies and expanding the trainer pool, and then also enhancing the County Ohio Human Services training system to enable regional coordinators to become full-time. So those are the recommendations. What's next, and what should you be looking for? As I mentioned, the JFS APS funding work group continues to meet, and we'll be looking at the core minimum standard requirements, the innovation funds, and then they'll also be talking about potential budget recommendations. Also, we should expect to see applications for county funding being developed both for the planning grants and as they flesh out the innovation fund process. Those applications should also be surfacing early next year. And then aligned with the budget recommendations, the folks who have been advocating for APS funding will continue to monitor that situation and will develop advocacy positions for the next budget, depending upon what the APS work group recommends and what shows up in the governor's budget. That could be in full support of that, or we could be advocating for additional funds or other changes. So that's what we see coming up as we move forward. So that concludes my presentation, and I can hand it over to Gayle.
Thank you, Beth. One of the really wonderful experiences of the last year, we believe at PCSAO, was our combined efforts with Beth and her groups and the Human Services Directors Association in making sure there was some attention in the MBR to the most vulnerable populations on either end of the life spectrum. So our children, who we have a responsibility to protect at PCSA, or in the counties at the child welfare agencies, and our elderly citizens. And I think it's just really important to say, when people come together and have a goal of finding protections for these very vulnerable populations, it made a lot of sense, not only to us, but to policymakers. And so we're really proud of the work that we could all collectively do in securing the $20 million in the MBR for adult protective services and child welfare. So the first question I have for all of you, if I knew that we could do that cute little thing with the voting, maybe I would have voted too, but I didn't know that, and I'm very bad on technology. But think for a minute, do all children deserve safety, permanency, and well-being regardless of where they live? And it's the same issue you have with education and many other local programs, in that so much of our funding is dependent on local dollars and a county's ability to collect on property tax. We're going to talk about that a lot later in the presentation, but what I just wanted to say about this is I want to give you one example of the disparity between our wonderful county agencies. You have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old who have been in the home of an opiate-using parent for over 2 years now. And if you know anything about opiates, and I think most everybody on here knows, that when a parent is addicted, they're very much in love with the drug, and they're not paying much attention to these little children. And these little children probably have experienced physical abuse, as well as watched domestic abuse in their homes. They probably don't have good nutrition. They are very, very traumatized at the point that they come into placement of a child welfare agency. If those little children lived in Hamilton County, where they have a very generous local levy, they would probably immediately be referred from their child welfare agency to a program called the Therapeutic Intervention Program, which works with that child, a combination of in a Head Start program with child psychologists on site, with other kinds of people working around other cognitive issues with the child, someone working with the family where the child either is in foster care or the child may be in kinship care. And what happens at that point, in about 18 months for those children, is the trauma that they have suffered greatly because of the time in a house with opiates. They will be well in terms of their mental health, and they will be well in terms of their physical health, and they will be able to start kindergarten in regular kindergarten and not in special ed classes, because Hamilton County can provide such an intensive program for small children who have been traumatized. In Ashland County, kind of north of here, where they have tried to pass a levy 3 times and have not been successful in doing that, those same 2 children would be in foster care, but they would not have opportunities like the Therapeutic Intervention Program in that county because the funds simply would not be available. So I want you to think about those disparities. So when we got to the MBR, as Beth said, both of our systems had requested $20 million, and in Public Children's Services, we felt that we needed for our system caseworkers to work with very complex cases, and many of those are with small children who have been being raised in opiate homes, and with our teenagers. Services and planning for our transitioning youth. This is a very, very important population for us, and we don't always have the available funds to be able to provide the things that will give our transitioning youth a really solid basis in terms of their life as they leave foster care. Special training on trauma-informed care, foster home recruitment, kinship care supports, and supporting counties without dollars. So these are the things that we were looking at when we asked the legislature for $20 million. And as Beth has said, they decided to split it, 10 for PCSAO, or for child welfare, and 10 for adult protective services. We work with the administration and conference committee to create 2 work groups that Beth has described, the Adult Protective Services work group. There was also, and is, a child welfare funding group, and that group agreed, the following was agreed to in the MBR process. First of all, a distribution of $3.2 million that immediately went out to all 88 counties for them to be used for matching dollars to bring in dollars to the local community or the local agency to support such things as independent living and college assistance for foster youth. So the agreement was we would take the first $3.2 million off the 10 and send it out to the counties, which was done on October 1st. And then after much discussion and many meetings, which Director Dungy from the Department of Job and Family Services chaired, The following was decided that we would use $6.8 million to be awarded by a grant program to the counties. And so we have something called Efficiency and Innovation Funds. Grant applications were due, I have that wrong on there. The results of the grant applications will be announced on November 24th. The grants themselves were due on November 7th. And the focus on the grants was to use dollars in one of four, or you could do more than one, but you had to address either adoption, in-home case visitation, recurrence of children coming into care, and reentry. And so over 70 counties submitted grants, and those grants, the ones that we know about that people have told us here at PCSAO, the ones that we know about addressed issues like foster home recruitment, kinship supports, treatment trauma-based for children and youth, supports for supervisors, programs for transitioning youth, and iPads and other technical support. And I know Beth had mentioned that too, but in a number of our counties, particularly our rural counties and our counties that cannot sustain levies, they do not have iPads, and the agencies that do use iPads and their workers can use iPads say that actually it frees up enough time for their workers that they can each see one additional case a day. So that technology will really mean a lot to some of these counties who don't have the technology at this point. So how did we reach the need for these things? Well, some data would say the number of reported cases of child abuse and neglect totaled almost 100,000 in 2013. As of January 1st, you can see that almost 13,000 children were in custody of a child welfare agency throughout the year. Probably that number could go as high as 15,000. 21% of these cases were assigned to alternative response, meaning that immediately when a case is we investigate a case, we can make a determination that with support and upfront services, we can work with that family and we do not have to take custody of that child, and we can be sure the family and the child are safe. Over 10 years, Ohio has led the nation with 42% reduction in placement, but we are beginning to see some of those numbers creep up. And a big reason for that is the number of children coming into care because of substance abusing parents. And I'll go through these slides very quickly. I'm just going to give you the one number on these three slides that is very instructive. In 2013, the number of children who came into care because of a substance abusing parent between the ages of 0 and 5 were 7,320 children. And between 0 and 1 were 1,019 children. And so if you look at this chart, what you will see is a preponderance of older children needing care and children 0 to 5. And the other thing we just point out is that these children stay in custody much longer than children who come in for other reasons. And 50% of them will stay in care for 300 days. Ohio ranks 50th in the nation in state investment for child welfare. Ohio is highest in the nation for local child welfare investment, but funding is extremely inequitable, and local child welfare agencies have suffered a 20% loss of scarce state funds in the past few years, including cuts to the state child protection allocation and state portion of adoption assistance. The reality is, if the state would double their share of what they put into child protection now, Ohio would still rank 50th in the nation in state investment for child welfare. 43% of our counties, 43% of our counties have are able to sustain levies. The rest cannot, so they do not have the local dollars to use, and basically they have federal dollars, most of those which have to be used for placement, and the few state dollars that they get, which is now about 8 cents on the dollar for what is spent in child welfare. So you will see us next continuing to work with the child welfare funding group and continuing to work at making the case for the needs for all of our counties to be able to deal with the very, very complex cases that we're seeing and be able to really work with these kids 0 to 5 and our transitioning children and put the resources into these agencies to support the caseworkers and to support the children and families that we are required to protect. And we will be back in the legislature and in the administration asking for additional dollars for many of these things. We'll see, I think one of the things that will give us a good indication of what's going on is the number of cases, or the different things that the individual counties have used in their grant program. So be ready to hear from us more. The children and our seniors, our vulnerable seniors, need our help, and Advocates for Ohio's Future really, really led the charge out there on this, and it is hoped that we will continue to do exactly that for our children and our seniors.
Okay. That was Gayle Tenenbaum, Director of Policy and Government Affairs with PCSAO. Next up, we have Joel Potts, the Executive Director with the Ohio Job and Family Service Directors Association.
All right, thanks, Will, and thanks to Advocates for Ohio's Future for pulling this together and all of your efforts. You know, I've been around this for 30 years, literally, when we've worked on APS and child welfare issues, and these are the first real and significant investments we've seen in both of these programs in quite some time, and I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it really is, you know, the platform that you all have laid out, pulling the advocate groups together so that we have a unified message and voice, and I think it's made a huge difference and will continue into the future. So thank you for both, you know, the efforts in this, you know, the advocacy efforts on these, and also this opportunity to talk with folks. Beth and Gayle have done a great job of going through the details of what's out there. I just want to make a couple points, and then we can get into questions, you know, from the group. But I do think this is a very exciting time. We have not had any real investments in APS from the state or federal government for more than a decade. And, you know, I've been in many, many, many work groups where we've done a lot of talking, but there's been very little action. And usually those work groups bog down quickly into issues of funding and governance instead of focusing on outcomes and seniors and children. So I'm very thankful for the direction that these groups have taken. Since the beginning of the APS program back in the early 1980s, county human service agencies had bulk of the responsibility and liability that comes with this, and that responsibility has fallen on a few workers who have very little flexibility, virtually no dollars to use, and no services. So we've ended up with a fractured or fragmented system throughout the state, and it greatly has hampered our ability to adequately serve our senior populations and our children. Levies have made a big difference, but as Gayle had just talked about, you know, in half of our communities, we don't have child welfare levies. Very few of our communities have senior levies that allow us to use those funding, that funding for senior services. And in APS, it's even more difficult, I think, than it is in child welfare sometimes. That, you know, there's been no set funding, but it's up to each individual county on how they really want to proceed. And you don't have the mandates and the structures and the types of things that are there for the child welfare system. And what we've ended up with is too often is a situation where at the local level where they don't have adequate funding, they have to pit seniors against children and decide, you know, where we should invest those dollars. So this work group, when we were talking about APS, I think really did what it needed to do, which say, you know what, let's just go back to the beginning. You know, what is it that is our core program? What is the core responsibility? You know, how are we going to move this program forward? You know, you need to crawl before you can walk, and you're going to walk before you can run. And $10 million, while it sounds like a lot of money, the truth is locally counties are putting over $20 million a year to have a very underserved population. So $10 million is a great investment to do something, but it wasn't going to change the APS system in the long run unless we did the types of things this work group has recommended. So I do think that building this core program is going to be key, and I think it's key for a lot of reasons. One, you know, we should have that standard. You know, we should know that regardless of where you live in the state, you're going to get, you know, where do you call, where do you go, you're going to get help, and how is that all going to work out. It also is going to do a great job of pulling folks together throughout the community. You know, a lot of the work group efforts are on making sure that you've got a community plan, and not just within the one community, but throughout the county and in multiple counties in some cases, you know, getting everybody involved in doing the types of things. But I also am a firm believer that when it comes to governance, that with knowledge comes responsibility. As long as it's your problem, it's nobody else's problem, and I think that's where we've been with APS. You know, it's been kind of this silent problem for a long time that while we keep, you know, hammering the state, you know, as long as it's a county responsibility solely and we don't have the good data and we don't have, you know, the types of systems we need to even know what really is happening in APS, as long as there was ignorance, and I don't mean stupidity, as long as there was ignorance, people not really understanding what was going on, it was easy to ignore the problem. This work group, and if we successfully implement these programs, it is going to give us the kind of information that's necessary to shine the light on this program and really focus resources where they need to be. And so I'm very hopeful for that. But future funding is going to be dependent on the successful implementation of this. There are a lot of requirements that are going to be on the local governments. There's a lot of requirements on the state, a lot of training requirements, some systems being changed, a lot of standardization, and a lot of planning that we're going to have to do. I think the scariest thing for counties, we feel a little bit like, you know, we've been instructed to go out and build a house, and that's all we've been told. Build it, make it big, do whatever you can. We want it as nice of a house as you can possibly get, but we're not going to guarantee that we're going to be able to help you pay for it when you're all said and done. So, you know, we're going to be in the budget process while a lot of this planning is going on. I think that as long as we can show innovation and we can show performance and that we're developing an outcome-based system, we'll be able to get some continued funding and continued investment in the state as they become more involved and more knowledgeable of the program. When it comes to child welfare, Gayle, I think you did a great job of just laying out, you know, the lack of state financial support has had a crippling effect on Ohio's child welfare program. We're very thankful for the money that was included in the NBR, but a lot more needs to be done. Over 80 proposals were submitted. Over 70 counties had submitted innovation grants, which is really, great. I mean, it shows. I mean, that was a 2-week turnaround. That is a very quick time to do something like this. But it really showed, you know, just the breadth of needs that are out there in the community. And when you look at, you know, some of these proposals and see the types of things that people have asked for, they really took this very seriously and looked at how could they use one-time monies to greatly enhance their ongoing programs. And I think if we're able to get these all funded and implemented, we're going to see some real differences, you know, as far as what's out there. However, the innovation grants, they may help us address a critical need. They are not going to help us to address the underlying financial problems of the state. We're going to continue to push hard for increased investment in this. We're also really going to push to increase the knowledge base, you know, that folks understand how the opiate epidemics, how behavioral health, mental health issues, and those types of things are really negatively impacting our families and our communities, and do a better job at tying all these things together and hopefully get increased investment so we can better serve folks. You know, just like in APS within our child welfare program, things vary from county to county. A lot of that's based on funding and based on their structure. It's not based on a lack of will or desire. And we need to do, again, more work on shining a spotlight on exactly what's out there. We saw a lot of really good innovative ideas in APS. They're also developing an innovation grant, and we're waiting anxiously to see what the parameters will be for that. But, you know, they're just basic things that we're not doing for APS. You know, bed bug eradication, helping folks just to clean their homes, folks that are denying to go, you know, get needed medical help because there's nobody to take care of the pets, and we need some place to just put the dogs and the cats for, a few weeks while they get the proper care. Getting court assistance, transportation, helping get home safe. There are folks out there whose water tank's been broken down forever, and they don't have hot water, and they don't have adequate plumbing, and they don't have safe electricity, and they don't live in safe homes. And, we're hoping that the innovation funds will allow us to provide the types of services and assistance that will really get us where we need to be. There's no doubt about it, Ohio can and must do more for the children and the seniors of this state. I think this lays a foundation for that. I think that Advocates for Ohio's Future really give us an incredible platform that I've never seen before to really start moving these things forward in a cohesive manner that's going to get the kind of attention we need. So thank you.
Thanks so much. I want to thank all of our speakers. Beth Kowalczyk, Chief Policy Officer with the Ohio Association of Area Agencies on Aging, Gayle Tenenbaum, the Director of Policy and Government Affairs at PCSAO, the Public Children's Services Association of Ohio, and Joel Potts, Executive Director of the Ohio Job and Family Service Directors Association. One of the things that we want to encourage everyone on this call, you can take action to strengthen services for children and seniors in your county and across the state. If you do work for a county with access to the innovation grant funding for adult protective services, you can begin to think about how those funds can be used and start a conversation with your local lawmakers about what's happening in your county, and begin to formulate a plan. If you don't work for a county, we will be gearing up for advocacy in this next state budget around adult protective services and child welfare. So with that, I want to open up the floor for questions. I know it is getting close to 11 o'clock, and I do have that, little secret presentation that I still want to share with folks. So I hope people will stay on just 5 minutes after 11. But for now, we'll create some space for you all to ask questions. You can either chat your questions, and I'm going to change the audio session so
all attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
So I know we had one question about whether or not people will be able to have access to this slideshow, and so everyone will get a copy. We will be sending a follow-up email to everyone, and you'll be able to have access to the PowerPoint if you follow up with us. *6 if you have a question, or even chat your question. Don't have any questions. I know time's getting short. Actually, yeah.
Will, this is Carl. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Welcome.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry that I got on late, but I heard probably half of the webinar. What I want to clarify, and I believe Gayle can clarify this fairly quickly, that there is a need for, I heard you say toward the end of your remarks, Gayle, that there's a need, and I take it an expectation that AOF will play a role with respect to the Children's Services advocacy in this upcoming budget session. Did I hear you correctly on that?
It certainly is something that I hope will happen, just as they did in the MBR, that they would be doing both APS and child welfare to continue what has been started. Needs a lot more added to move our systems to where they need to be to protect the people that we need to be protecting. So absolutely, I mean, I'm hopeful as we're looking at our work at AOF that these, again, will be two issues where people will want to continue to support and focus some of our energies in the 16-17 biennial budget. And go get to know your legislators now. I cannot say that enough. A lot of you have new legislators. Get them to your agencies, get them to things in your neighborhood, go educate them about the various issues that you're concerned about. from Advocates for Ohio's perspective. We really need that local intervention with legislators, and as I said, particularly our new legislators.
Is critical. Thanks, Gayle, and thanks, Call, for the question. We had a question from Judy Simon about the timing around the Adult Protective Services Innovation Grant. She asked, will we be given more time to prepare for that? So, Beth or Joel, do you know the time frame of when that will be happening?
It's a great question, Judy. Hopefully we'll have more understanding of that this afternoon. The APS work group meets for the first time since the Controlling Board approved the action. We are hoping for a little more meat around that. I would hope that we'll have more time as we go through the planning. I know one of the things that Director Moody, who chaired this group, had said was if monies are unspent in other areas, he was hoping to move those into the innovation grant. So I think he's anticipating that the innovation grant will be open as long as there are dollars available, as opposed to child welfare where they knew, the need, for that kind of thing was going to far exceed the allocation. So they want to put as much money into it as possible. They want to get the core planning. So I don't know the answer, but again, I'm hoping we get more meat on that today.
Thanks, Judy, for the question, and thanks, Joel. So I'm actually going to skip ahead. I know probably for people who are on our email list, I sent out an email on Tuesday morning to share your healthcare story. So this is another thing that we're preparing for the next state budget and preparing for another heavy lift and a fight around maintaining Medicaid. And so we've never actually done this on a webinar, but we're going to try to share a short video with y'all, and so bear with us.